Hi, I'm Ashley Swartz. I hope that if you're watching this, you are safe, you're at peace, and you're in just a good place because it's hard to be in a good place of late. So I'm the CEO of Furious Corp, and I'm the dean of the faculty for Beat University. I want to thank Andy and Katie for making this happen. This is our eighth class of Beat U, and so we've been doing this for a while. And for those of you that started at the beginning or went back and watched some of particularly the first episode we have, or the first class that was in session, you know that I started doing this during COVID because I personally, selfishly needed to have a sense of purpose during the lockdown and quarantine and everything. I needed to be a lighthouse in the darkness. So who I am as a person is I try and lead my life with an open heart and loving kindness. And in this moment, more than any moment in the last 3 months, my heart is really heavy, as I suspect a lot of yours are. And my desire to be a lighthouse is stronger than ever. But finding how and where to start and what to do has been the hardest part for me. So I'm blessed to have a voice and a platform, and I'm grateful to Andy for giving that to me. And I feel it would be remiss today to leverage one of these classes to not address the big gorilla in the room. And that is the current unrest in our country and the role that media, our industry, we play in stoking fires of division, fear, and hate. And having a very honest conversation about that. A conversation that is not political, not about your party affiliation, not about wrong or right, but about being human and about love and what that means. And so I want to talk about that today. So before you tune out and you think I'm going to get super preachy, I'm not. I'm going to talk about television. I'm going to talk about television advertising in the context of this moment in time, this unprecedented moment in time of history in our country. And more importantly, I'm going to talk about how sellers and brands can do good and do well. And in doing so, be part of the change that is going to heal our nation and is needed to heal our nation. So the Reverend Dr. King said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. So when the noise of hate fills our news, our television programming, social media, and now our streets, we must shine a light of love that is so bright that it becomes the signal that leads us out of the darkness. I have some ideas that I'm going to talk about today, how we as an industry can be a lighthouse for our nation and ultimately be a lighthouse that provides that beacon of hope. I never thought that in preparing for a segment for Beat or anything in the industry for work that I would go back and do a little refresher and read the Bill of Rights. But I did that over the last couple of days. And I found myself diving into constitutional law and particularly unpacking and reading the sort of interpretation and rulings of Supreme Court Justices Brandeis and Holmes, and particularly their interpretation of freedom of the press. So I was drawn there because of what happened last week. So Friday morning, I got up as I normally do, sipping my coffee, checking out my news, the news that I choose to read, and my news feeds. And I was, shown. I sort of came upon a video of CNN correspondent Oscar Jimenez being arrested. So he was, covering the Minneapolis protests, was standing. There was a moment of calm or a break in the violence, and there was a moment of calm. There was a line of officers behind him in full riot gear, and he was there with his crew. He was covering it. They came over to him, and he told them he was standing where he was told to stand. He'll happily move. He was with the press. He was respectful. He was professional. He openly expressed that he would happily abide by whatever direction he was provided, and that he was here with CNN. And one of the police officers proceeded to arrest him, not provide him with cause, not Mirandize him, and then take him away. That officer didn't know the camera was running. And then those officers continued to do that to the entirety of his crew while the camera was placed on the ground and continued to roll the live feed back to CNN. So this is why the First Amendment is the foundation of a free democratic nation. It's so that we as the people can be aware and can stop injustice and tyranny with knowledge as a weapon of power. That's the role the press plays, and that's why freedom of the press is so important. The press is a medium through which we report, we make aware, and ultimately hold accountable those in power to uphold democracy and protect our liberties. On Friday morning, I was disturbed and despondent because one of the first things taken from citizens in the midst of tyranny is the freedom of the press. And then I began to think about the role of media. Self-awareness. I was being self-reflective, my industry. And in particular, I then sort of started to think about local and cable TV news and in the waves of this sickness that have broken our nation. First, the sickness of a virus, and now the sickness of racism, rearing its ugly head. It's not like it's new. I just want to be very clear. So what's our role as an industry? When we look in the mirror, what do we see? What do we see looking back at us? Do we see champions for democracy? Do we see a platform for propaganda? A medium that encourages hate and plants fear? A cornerstone of a free society? A place where hope can be found? The truth lies somewhere in the middle of all of those. But a more important truth is that straddling the line between hate and hope, somewhere in the middle, will not make media part of the solution. It will only continue to be part of the problem. Sellers lost most of their most valuable inventory on television due to COVID. But television ratings for news programming are the highest they have been in 20 years on both cable and national broadcast networks. Clearly, Americans rely on social media as well for news, and that's ever increasingly more Americans. But evening national broadcast news programs viewing is up 35% year over year, reaching a combined 29.4 million viewers for the first 6 weeks of COVID from mid-March of this year. Adults 25 to 54, a very, very attractive segment, viewing news have risen by 49%. And the three most watched cable networks in April were the news networks. Fox News in total day was up 65% year over year, averaging 2.2 million viewers, with its second best month ever since the Iraq War and coverage of that in 2003. As Bill Maher calls it, the panic porn of COVID drew audiences. But in May, those audiences spoke by their actions and their viewing behaviors, because all broadcasters and networks saw audiences decline due to what Pew Research calls pandemic fatigue. Pew Research found that 71% of Americans need a break from the news, and 43% say that emotionally the news makes them feel worse. Makes them feel worse. Stop. Pause. Just reflect on that. Metabolize that. Digest it, right? When the mental health of Americans is negatively impacted by programming on television, we have to pause and ask why. So during a time when Americans need hope and light, yes, there is crisis to report, but they need hope and light and to be informed and connected more than ever. There's something wrong if it literally is damaging to their mental health to watch television. Wrong because I know there is another side to the narratives we are leaning into. I know that. I know it because I've sought stories of hope and light to find that for myself over the last 3 months, and more than ever and voraciously over the last 5 days. And I've found them, but I don't see them on television as part of the day-to-day narrative that we tell we tell America about America. About our politics, our citizens, our country, our state of our nation. We don't prioritize that and give the good as much airtime as we give the bad. So as I've said before, one of the reasons that I love television and I'm so proud to be part of this industry is, and I believe in it, is because it brings people together, families, fans, super fans on social media and other places. TV is a shared experience. It has the power to help Americans heal and find our shared sense of humanity and community again. But instead, when it matters most, we've proven to be fuel to the fire of hate and conflict and despair and division. The First Amendment has provided air cover to the media industry for decades. We can't forget that or forsake that. It's afforded us protection from censorship and freedom of expression. For those of you that need a refresher, just thought you might want to join me, we can level set here. The First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. It is now the media industry's turn to return the favor and afford the same protection to American citizens by leveraging the freedom of press to prevent the further spreading of hate, propaganda, fear, and tyranny under the label of news, and to use content and media to unite our nation instead. That's our job. At least I think it is. It is not just the constancy of negative headlines that play on fear and panic to attract audience and attention, whose impact on our nation we need to consider. We must also stop our silence or avoidance in the absence of diversity, lead actors of color, heroes of color, and stories that speak to all America in our programming, in lieu of just the privileged white Americans, which we mostly speak to today. We're getting an apocalyptic storm, so I'm gonna shut the windows. I'll be right back. I feel like the universe is speaking to us because literally the skies just opened and it has gotten dark and the winds are coming. So I want to be clear that I think part of the reason this is important to me is because the irony can't be lost that coupled with the freedom of press and religion, is the freedom of religion, the freedom to assemble, which is protest. And all of this is contained in the First Amendment. Literally, my house might blow away. Literally, my house might blow away. The media industry, and in particular at this moment, news journalism, has an obligation to viewers and to this country to not take these rights for granted and to leverage our platforms to protect all of the First Amendment's rights for every American, regardless of color, race, etc. So media, particularly broadcasters of news, are not the bad guys here. That's really important, right? But they are in an incredible position of power and influence and have to decide. So there's a short-term gain to be had in leveraging the unrest in America as an opportunity to increase ratings, as well as there was with COVID, right? Or there's a long tail that will require courage and conviction to ultimately decide to lead with journalistic integrity and work to suffocate bias by presenting objective coverage of politics, events, and crises. It's not my intention to call out or myopically focus on news, but I believe it deserves a spotlight because of how important it is to sellers of TV advertising, having gotten through that as their growth medium when they lost their most valuable inventory during COVID. And then ultimately now that we have these tensions and this unrest in our country, there is further impact there. And the second half of 2020 is going to be critical, and media is going to be of paramount importance in helping our nation heal, because ultimately it's an election year. And it is political advertising that is going to help sellers of media be flat, particularly television sellers, remain flat, or potentially even see growth in this year when all signs tell us that we should have been down year over year because of COVID and now because of what's happening. So I suspect that some of these numbers may need to be revised, but estimates on political TV spend right now are at $6.7 billion for this year. That is up from $6 billion prior to COVID. It's also because it's an election year that freedom of press is more important than ever. Here's the rub that gets me and why it requires a conscious collective in our industry to form across the value chain from end to end to enable to be part of the change for the better. Ratings matter and drive revenue. News, more so on TV, slants increasingly negative. That's what I see. That's the research. This is what I've been doing the last 2 days, is really validating the thesis I have and what I've heard my neighbors and the people that I love